The Battle of Chaldiran, fought in 1514 Common Era, was a major battle that pitted the Ottoman Sultanate against the Safavids. The significance of this battle cannot be overstated, as its outcome would shape the balance of power in the region, as the victor would determine the religious and geopolitical dynamics of the Middle East. In this video, we will delve into one of the most important battles of the 16th century. But before we start, please remember to give this video a like and to leave us a comment, as this would really help us on the YouTube algorithm. Furthermore, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and to turn on notifications to keep up to date with our latest content. Jazakallahu khairan. First, a little context. In the early 16th century, the Ottoman Empire faced potential vulnerability that could lead into a civil war for succession. Among the 5 potential heirs, 3 emerged as strong contenders for Sultan. The first was the eldest, Ahmed, who was known as an able administrator and was well liked by the people. He favoured his father's policies of peace and had support of most of the administrators. The second candidate was Kurkut, who was popular amongst the ulama. In fact, he had grown up in the court of his grandfather Mehmed II. But he had shown very little military talent. The third had been Selim, who had been by far the most militant and warlike of his brothers. A divided Ottoman Sultanate would not only endanger the Sultanate itself, but also the entire Ummah. And this was because of the rise of the infamous Safavid Empire. The Safavid dynasty emerged in the early 16th century with Twelver Shi'ism as the state religion. This resulted into a complete transformation in the religious identity of Iran, with the country becoming a majority Shia population. But who were the Safavids? Their roots go back to a man called Safiuddin. Now, interestingly, Safiuddin had been a prominent member of a Sufi order called the Zahidiyya. However, the Zahidiyya order would later rename themselves as the Safiya order, after Safiuddin, and over the next 2 centuries, they would grow in number. All this time, they would remain Sufi. However, somewhere in the early decades of the 15th century, the Safavid movement would convert to Twelver Shia beliefs. The one usually associated with this decision was a man called Khawaja Ali, and it is said he had done so to distinguish themselves from other rivals in the region. Since then, the order adopted a more militant approach, and their leaders were no longer seen as men of ascetic nature, but worshipped. The historian Andrew Newman describes their new approach as the following: a new, militant, messianic, religio-political discourse, and its leaders were viewed as divine. The shift also signaled the start of an offensive military strategy. Their big moment came in 1501 Common Era. The Safavids would capture a key city in Iran, Tabriz, then formed their own empire, the Safavid Empire. And thus, the Safavids were now on the rise. And things were about to get a lot worse, as they were now headed by their most powerful and dangerous leader yet. And that leader had been Ismail bin Haydar, better known as Shah Ismail, who had been a direct descendant of Safiuddin. In 1501, he declared himself the global leader of the Shia community and encouraged rebellion against all Sunni powers in the region. His biggest supporters were the Qizilbash, a dedicated faction who had unparalleled loyalty to the Shah. And this was because they literally worshipped him. Historian Ilhan Niyaz writes, the Qizilbash loyalists were fanatical in their determination to execute their spiritual master's orders, for they believed if they fell trying to obey him, they were assured a place in the paradise. The Qizilbash commanders and soldiers worshipped the Safavid Shah and were willing to die for their master. The Safavid worship of the Shah was not mere Sunni propaganda. It was also noted by an Italian merchant who had passed through Iran during this period, stating, "This Sufi Ismail is loved and reverenced by his people as a god, and especially by his soldiers." He then notes how they even changed the Islamic declaration of faith, stating, "As the Muslims say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah, the Persians say, La ilaha illallah wa Ismail waliyallah, wa a'udhu billah." He goes on to say, "Besides this, everyone, and particularly his soldiers, consider him immortal. But I have heard that Ismail is not pleased with being called a god or a prophet." This latter part suggests that the Shah did not attribute divinity to himself. However, here the merchant is mistaken. In a poem attributed to Shah Ismail, he foolishly claimed, "I am very God, very God, very God. Come now, O blind man, who has lost the path, behold the truth." In another version, he reportedly wrote, "Prostrate thyselves, pander not to Satan. Adam has put on new clothes. God has come, God has come. Wa'udhu billah." Such sources is evidence that the Shah did in fact view himself as divine. Even a report in Venice referred to him as a new prophet. More worryingly, considering how his followers viewed him and what he thought of himself, it could be argued that he may be one of the 30 minor dajjals that the Prophet ﷺ prophesied. Going back to the timeline of events, thousands responded to the Shah's call, and with the help of the Qizilbash, Shah Ismail expanded his territory from eastern Anatolia all the way to Baghdad, inciting revolts along the way. Things were not looking good for the Sunni Muslims. On the Sunnis living in Iran, one source states, "The Safavids sowed terror among the largely Sunni inhabitants, forcing people to condemn the first three caliphs in public." Furthermore, it was feared that no Sunni power would stand up to the Safavids, leaving the Shah to expand unopposed. The Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II's initial response was feeble, preferring peace rather than direct confrontation. But this decision would prove to be disastrous, as we will discuss later. While the Mamluks had no interest in conflict with the Safavids, and even contemplated forming an alliance with them, the situation appeared bleak, as no one seemed capable of challenging this new power, except for one individual, and that man had been Prince Selim. Selim the Grim, or Yavuz, is often described as a polarizing figure, mostly being accused of being heavy-handed and excessive by his critics. However, going back to Sultan Selim, it is crucial not to overlook the alternative perspective of the Sultan, which is too often ignored. Selim championed Sunni Islam and the Sharia, and sought fatwa before making significant decisions. Lufti Pasha comes to the defense of Sultan Selim's reign, expressing, "If the dominion of the Sharia is in good order, it is entirely through the sovereignty of Sultan Selim." There are also numerous reports of Selim receiving ru'yas which feature the Prophet ﷺ. Moreover, Selim I opposed the practice of fratricide, declaring, "May they be remote from Allah's mercy in this world and the next." Although he did acquire his position by force, there were legitimate reasons behind his actions, which we will discuss later. Some supporters of Selim argue that his successful reign is evidence in itself that he had been a good person. However, a response to this can be found in Hadith in Sahih Muslim 111, in which the Prophet ﷺ informs us, "Verily, Allah helps this faith even by a sinful person," or in the Arabic, by a man who is a fajri. Regarding this ongoing debate, this channel's stance is that Selim's reign was needed, and it was he who saved Sunni Islam, regardless on who he really was as a person. Wallahu a'lam. Turning our attention back to the emergence of the Safavids, the Ottomans found themselves at a loss on what to do. Sultan Bayezid and his son Ahmed's attempts to resolve the situation peacefully proved to be ineffective, leaving the empire directly affected. However, Selim had been different. He had complete hatred for the Safavids. Furthermore, he had long urged his father to confront Shah Ismail. In 1505 Common Era, he successfully defeated a regiment dispatched by Shah Ismail, and again in 1510 Common Era, and it was only through the intervention of Bayezid that the confrontation between the two was settled. The renowned historian Ibn al-Athir once wrote in Tarikh al-Kamil, Volume 1, page 6, "When Allah wills something, He prepares the means for it." And this quote can very well be used to describe the following event. For despite its plight, it ultimately shifted the Janissary's full support behind Prince Selim. A self-proclaimed follower, literally translating to slave of Shah, which again only further exemplified their worship of Shah Ismail, openly rebelled against the Ottomans in western Anatolia. And with a force of approximately 20,000, Shahkulo's marauding troops unleashed massacres and destruction in Ottoman-controlled regions. One eyewitness describes their actions as the following: "They destroyed everything, men, women and children, and even sheep and cattle, if there were too many. They destroyed cats and chickens. They looted valuable possessions of the villagers in the Qutahya province, such as carpets, and burnt them." Although Shahkulo would eventually be killed in July 1511, this rebellion ignited anger among the Ottomans. In addition to the massacres he committed, many felt that the Ottoman response was slow and feeble, blaming the Sultan for his seemingly passive response leading up to this event. The Janissaries turned to Prince Selim and put their support behind him, and in 1512 Common Era, together they marched to Istanbul and forced Sultan Bayezid to relinquish the throne. Upon becoming Sultan, Selim I immediately began hunting down the leaders of the Qizilbash, who resided within Ottoman territory, and began preparing for war against Shah Ismail. In spite of Shah Ismail and the Qizilbash's actions, there was a sense of uneasiness from the Ottoman populace in confronting the Safavids. This was because the lands that they were about to go to war with had rooted Muslim heritage. To address this, Nuruddin Hamza Sarigorz and Shamsuddin Ahmed Kemal Pazada, both muftis, explicitly provided the verdict that Shah Ismail and the Qizilbash should be considered disbelievers and justified engaging them in conflict. 1514 Common Era, Selim ordered a complete ban on trade with Iranian silk. Selim aimed to hit their economy. An envoy was sent to the Mamluk Sultan, Al-Ghuri, informing him that the Ottomans planned on invading Iran. Furthermore, he invited him to join forces and asked that if he did not intend to provide support, then he should at the very least stay out of it. However, he did warn that if at any point the Mamluks chose to aid the Safavids, then he should expect the full wrath of the Ottoman forces on the Mamluk-controlled territories. Going back to the war on the Safavids, in that same year, Selim sent the following letter to Shah Ismail, which was essentially an ultimatum. For the sake of analysis, we will read out the letter in 3 parts. The first goes like this: From the Caliph of Allah, the warrior in the path, the defender of the faith, to the ruler of the kingdom of the Persians, the possessor of the land of the tyranny and perversion. It has been repeatedly heard that you have subjected the upright community of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to your devious will, that you have undermined the firm foundation of faith, that you have unfurled the banner of oppression in the cause of aggression, that you no longer uphold the commandments and prohibitions of the divine law, that you have encouraged the shedding of innocent blood, that you have rent the noble stuff of Islam with the hand of tyranny. Interestingly, here we learn that Selim is referring to himself as a caliph, which only exemplifies how he viewed himself, which is the defender of Sunni Islam and the Ummah. He then goes on to say, "If Allah Almighty wills, the lightning of our conquering sword shall uproot the untamed bramble grown to great heights in the path of the refulgent divine law. The thunder of our avenging mace shall dash out the muddled brains of the enemies of the faith as rations for the lion-hearted Ghazis." Here, Selim is trying to intimidate the Shah, but again, portraying himself as a champion of the Sharia. The third and final part goes like this: "But should you take up a course of repentance, become like one blameless, and return to the sublime straight path of the Sunnah of Muhammad alayhi salam, and should you consider your lands and their people part of the well-protected Ottoman state, then shall you be granted our royal favour and imperial patronage." From this last part, we can understand that Selim offered Shah Ismail one final chance, asking him to convert to Sunni Islam and give up his territory, and in return he shall be given protection under the Ottoman state. However, the Shah would reject Selim's offer, claiming that there was no need for war, and adding, "He who falls upon the house of Ali always falls." What followed next was a war of words between the two rulers. Selim would send him insult after insult, hoping to provoke him into war. The Shah would choose to ignore him. But after the insults would not stop, he finally responded with this following letter and ill gift. The letter of which goes like this: "There is no cause for improper words. Indeed, those vain heretical imputations are the mere fabrications of the opium-clouded minds of certain secretaries and scribes. We therefore think that our delayed reply was not completely without cause, for we have now dispatched our honoured personal companion and servant, Shah Kuli Agha, may he be sustained, with a golden casket stamped with the royal seal, and filled with a special preparation for their use should they deem it necessary." And sure enough, Shah sent Selim a casket full of opium. By this, the Shah was suggesting that Selim was under the influence of drugs. So, what was Selim's reaction to this? He sent a letter back to the Shah stating, "It is known that you get the strength of character by using that disgraceful substance. Use that which you are extremely dependent on, so that you will have the courage for confrontation." Then he marched straight to the borders of the Ottoman and Safavid empires, hoping that the Shah would come out and face him in battle. However, the Shah refused to meet him, and when Selim learnt of this, he sent him another letter stating, "Even after this, if you resort to seclusion, as you did before, calling you a man should be outlawed. Instead of a helmet, you should wear a veil, and you should prefer women's clothes over armor. You should abandon your ambition for commander-in-chiefdom and give up your lust for leadership." And to add insult to injury, he sent him a gift of his own, women's clothing, and a handkerchief, with a note that stated, "For you, who is unworthy to be called a man, these are more fitting than a turban and a helmet." One cannot express how much anger and humiliation this may have caused for the Safavids. Remember, the Qizilbash literally worshipped Shah Ismail, and here was Selim insulting him and accusing him of being not man enough to face him. This last insult finally gave Selim the response that he wanted. Shah Ismail would finally agree to confront him, and the two would engage in battle. The two armies would meet at Chaldiran Valley, in modern-day Azerbaijan, in August 1514 Common Era. Selim's army had already dwarfed Ismail's, but Selim's numbers were not his main advantage here. Selim's firearms are what truly put him ahead of his rival. Equipping his men with the latest muskets and cannons, while the Shah relied on traditional weaponry. The Safavids were unsure on how to deal with Selim's new firepower. Kenneth Chase writes, "The senior Qizilbash commander on the left wing, who was familiar with the Ottoman tactics, urged Ismail to attack the Ottoman army before it could form its wagon lager. The senior Qizilbash commander on the right wing, who was a nephew Ismail, proposed instead that they wait until the Ottoman army had finished deploying. Ismail had never lost a battle, and he considered himself divinely inspired, not to mention invincible. He waited until the Ottomans set up their guns and charged them head on." If this is true, then it appears that Ismail's delusion got the better of him, because the decision to wait would prove to be a disaster. The battle commenced on the 23rd of August. However, there was not much of a fight. The Ottoman superior firepower, with cannons and muskets, in a tight formation, proved decisive. Iyas Pasha, who was the head of the artillery, unleashed a barrage of bullets, easily picking off the Safavid soldiers. Furthermore, whenever the Ottoman cavalry clashed with the Safavid horses would turn back after being frightened by the sound of gunfire. The Safavids were easily defeated, and Shah Ismail was injured, forcing him to retreat.
مشاعل الأنوار هم للنسيم عبيره الفوار هم قادة رفعوا التميز راية هم في العزيمة همة الأنصار هم للطريق مشاعل. But rather than go after him, Selim hesitated to pursue the retreating Safavids, fearing it might have been a trap. Instead, he held his troops in Chaldiran for a few more days to bury the fallen soldiers and consider their next move. But it was over. Selim had defeated the Shah. Victory at Chaldiran would prove to be decisive. The Ottomans now cemented their position, and they were set to become a global power. Furthermore, the battle marked a transition in firepower, and other empires began building similar weaponry. Kenneth Chase claims that Shah Ismail had 2,000 muskets built from Ottoman deserters. However, his reputation had already been damaged. Up to this point, Shah Ismail had not suffered a single defeat. But humiliation at Chaldiran embarrassed even his most loyal supporters, who believed he had been divine. When Shah Ismail's wife learnt of the outcome, she informed nearby knights of the following: "May you be sacrificed for Selim. You scattered our Shah and forced him to flee, all because of your escape." However, the Sunnis living under Safavid territory celebrated. For example, Fadlullah bin Rozbihan Khunji from Isfahan wrote to Selim, urging him to come and complete the conquest of Iran, stating, "Come break the idol, Shah Ismail, by the aid of the faith, and add the kingdom of Iran to the throne of Rome, Constantinople." However, it was not meant to be. With the Shah now defeated, he no longer posed as an immediate threat. Instead, Selim turned his attention to the Mamluks. According to Ulia Shilbi, Sultan al-Ghuri of the Mamluks had sent aid in the support of the Safavids during the battle, which infuriated Selim. In response, Selim would annex all the territories belonging to the Mamluks, adding Egypt and Levant to his realm. In the next 6 years, Ottoman territory would triple under Selim. Final thoughts. Irrespective of the differing viewpoints of Sultan Selim, it is undeniable that he played a crucial role in saving the Ummah against Shah Ismail. The Battle of Chaldiran showcased his military prowess and strategic brilliance, and therefore deserves praise, at least in this instance. Furthermore, his leadership and determination in defeating Shah Ismail also demonstrated that he had the military strength to defend the Ummah, and therefore, in our opinion, had the right to claim leadership. In spite of everything, Selim's legacy should also be remembered, of a man who stood up and defended the Ummah when no one else dared to.
هم للطريق مشاعل الأنوار، هم للنسيم عبيره الفوار، هم قادة رفعوا التميز راية، هم في العزيمة همة الأنصار. هم للطريق مشاعل الأنوار، هم للنسيم عبيره الفوار، هم قادة رفعوا التميز راية، هم في العزيمة همة الأنصار. لبناء جيل رائد بسلاحه علما وروحا للتقدم جاري، لبناء جيل رائد بسلاحه علما وروحا للتقدم جاري، وبمنهج شرب الأصالة منهما ذاك الكتاب وسنة المختار، ذاك الكتاب وسنة المختار. للطريق مشاعل الأنوار، هم للنسيم عبيره الفوار، هم قادة رفعوا التميز راية، هم في العزيمة همة الأنصار. هم للطريق مشاعل الأنوار، هم للنسيم عبيره الفوار، هم قادة رفعوا التميز